Fabulous. Welcome, everybody. Just letting people in as we get started, and sorry for a little delay. We've gotten to a pretty good conversation just prepping for talking with everybody here, and it's going to be an interesting chat. So looking forward to today. Welcome to the session focused on women's sport and sponsorship, and how brands can get invested in and move the opportunities along and really showcase women's sport and take advantage of that. So I'm Brad McCabe with Sponsor Circle. We've been hosting these virtual coffee chats for some time. All of them are available on our website, and happy to send you a link and you can get caught up on a variety of the topics we've been looking at. I'm going to shamelessly plug the upcoming sessions. So in January and early February, we've got a session on brands with purpose, and then another session lined up discussing member associations, business associations, and the specific nuances of sponsorship in that space. So we'll be sending out information on that in the new year, and hopefully you can join us. But for today's session, we've got opportunity to put in the chat any questions you have going through. We've got a number of questions that people have sent in ahead of time, as well as both Dana, Joanne, and I have set up some things we think you'll be interested in chatting about. But I'd like to welcome both Joanne Stansel and Dana Gladstone to the conversation, and thank you so much for participating today. You've got such a interesting investment in women's sport and women's hockey, and really happy to delve into that. So Dana Gladstone's with Hockey Canada. She's the Vice President of Partnership, Strategy, and Licensing. And then Joanne Stansel comes for Sofina Foods, which represents a number of different brands, including the Jane's brand and Maestro and San Daniele, among others, and is the Senior Manager of Partnerships and Sponsorships. And Joanne, why don't I give you a chance to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks again for having us, Brad. We're really proud of this program, and it's been a love child for many folks, some on the call. So, and I've worked at Sofina 7 years and lead this exercise and really work hard with our internal teams and stakeholders to support our customers as well as connect with consumers. And every opportunity that we have to lead with purpose is a benefit, as it's a very congested world these days from a communication standpoint. So again, thanks for having me here.
Great. And Dana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and Brad, thank you very much for the invitation today. It's nice to see some familiar names out there. For those of you who don't know me, Dana Gladstone, I'm VP of Partnership Strategy and Licensing for Hockey Canada. Over a career, and I won't tell you how long it is. I have experience on the property side for Hockey Canada, also many years at the Canadian Football League, and also with what was the Molson India at one point in Toronto and the Grand Prix in Montreal, and on the agency side with Lang and Associates, and also with Clare & Momentum, and some time on the client side with Canadian Tire. So try to bring a 360 view to what we do, and just heading into 9 years with Hockey Canada. Have the great fun and privilege of working with Joanne and her team at Sofina for several years now as we've built this program together, and very happy to be here to chat about it today.
Great, and I think we're coming into a really timely opportunity for what you guys have been doing together. Really came on my radar, the Jane's All In program last year during the juniors and leading up to that. And there's so many legs to what you're doing together in that program. But I guess how did the partnership first come together? Was this a Sofina-led conversation, or Dana, had you brought it to the table and kind of developed it from there?
Well, I think we knocked on Joanne's door kind of out of the blue. And we did that about, Joanne, I'm going to say about 4 years ago now. We talked about how to build a partnership. All In was not even a twinkle in anybody's eye at the time. It really was we started at the beginning. We started with discovery sessions, understanding Jane's brand, and looking at opportunities that we kind of built together. I'd say we talked for 2 years, 2.5 years before we actually landed on a partnership. And it was, there were some unique components to it that came from our discussion over time, and that eventually evolved into the all-in program. And maybe Joanne, you'll add some of that from your perspective.
Yeah, so what's important for us is grassroots and supporting these that we do business in. And James has been very involved in not-for-profit organizations, and we'd long time sponsored the CHL. And when we joined Canada, it was what was that differentiating factor that added to our portfolio, and that was really the addition of the authenticity and the legitimate access to women's game. We always long time wanted to do something around girls and women's hockey. And so we initially had a program that was already built off the shelf in terms of the Design a Mask program. And in our first year, we executed that. It typically had only been done at the World Juniors, but we flipped it to do it with the Women's Worlds team. So we had all that lined up. We were celebrating the alumni from Hockey Canada's past in terms of the legends of the game. And then COVID happened. So there's a big pause on obviously the women's game as that event was passed around a few times, but it gave us the gift of time. And we understood the opportunity to put our ear to the ground and listen to the groundswell that was happening in terms of women's sports. Just the momentum behind, Bianca Andreescu with, She the North, the different moves that have happened in front offices and, refs, et cetera. There's tremendous progress that was happening. Even just before Women's Worlds, right, with the 3-on-3 at the NHL All-Star Game, there was profile being built. And we saw the opportunity to, recognizing that there's two things that are lacking in women's sports. One is funding and one is awareness. So Jane's is not the brand to create a sustainable league. However, we can lend our profile and our platform to drive awareness. And if we do all those things right, the funding should follow. And really it was about tapping into the sentiment of, the juniors is a long time tradition, and it's a cherished event by Canadians. So we wanted to use the familiar tournament to shine a light on the unfamiliar, and make these women household names and give them the recognition that they deserve. So that was really the grounding insight that got us to All In. And with Dana's support and their team, we decided to flip the script on the Design a Mask and use the goalie mask, which is known for being a canvas of conversation and an expression, to help tell a really important story and share it with Canadians.
Yeah, and I think there's, I've seen a lot of the different pieces of what you've put together in the program, and it's more than just the game itself and for the Women's Worlds or being tied to the juniors. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about just the different avenues you've gone to bring this together and, take it beyond just the individual, TV coverage.
Yeah, so TSN has been a great partner in terms of that amplification element, right? It's really getting it to the masses. We've had great success with Hockey Canada going down to the grassroots level with their members, as well as, what's really important for us is creating value add to our customers, all the major retailers in Canada, and value add back to their consumers. So in terms of leveraging our assets, in terms of promotion, point of sale materials, as well as our packaging. Last year we put male and female athletes, so World Junior athletes and National Women's Team athletes in the same campaign, and that was a first. So there's a lot of firsts that have happened out of this, which is a rare commodity when it comes to activating in a hockey space, and that's been a really exciting component of it.
And I just add to that this program is really aligns well with what we're doing it Hockey Canada with the idea of one team and one leaf. In the past, our teams have been promoted and communicated separately, 3 separate entities, men's, women's, and our para hockey program. And we've made a shift to our brand, which is combining all 3, looking through a lens at all 3, even though there are individual programs. And what's really unique about the Jane's All In program is that it uses the platform of the World Juniors to shine the light on the national women's team. So combining the 2, and that's really what captured the imagination of our hockey operations group, who are responsible for assembling and managing and fielding our national teams through for men, women, and para. And they looked at this and thought how well aligned it was with where we are going as an organization. And so the opportunity to use the lens that's on the World Juniors, our highest profile event of the year, and to use that as a way to tell a women's story, to celebrate those athletes who are and really the pioneers and the trailblazers of the women's game, as we did last year for the first time. It was something that was very easy to say yes to, because it was so well aligned. And then we were able to celebrate 6 of our national women's team alumni last year. And there's a slightly different approach that is coming for this year, which you'll have to wait and see. We'll be launching shortly. But we're very excited about what the evolution of that campaign will be like, and how we continue to raise awareness for our women athletes, and we really use them as a way to inspire our next generation. And we're always looking to inspire girls and everybody to play the game, just for fun, for exercise, for mental health, for the values that you learn, for the sense of community and socialization that you gain through the game. And then to inspire those athletes who have the skill and the drive to aspire to be on our national team, to use those athletes as role models. So just perfectly aligned for us from both a brand perspective and a hockey perspective. So again, program that has been completely embraced by our organization, and we're really excited to be able to share the next iteration with you in a couple of weeks.
And I think you bring up an interesting comment there. It's all under one leaf. So do you find, because you've got so many different elements that you're supporting through Hockey Canada, whether it's youth program, it's professional, it's the international program, women's and men's, does your approach vary depending on which vertical you're working with, or do you try and approach it all in the same fashion?
We approach them all relatively the same, because we feel that there's tremendous value in all 3 types of hockey within our organization. We're fortunate that we have both grassroots and high performance under the same roof. So there are many different ways that we can develop programs or activations with our partners. And we really, as an organization, we support all 3 as equally as we can, because the nature of men's hockey having a professional stream that is so robust and so well developed compared to the women's stream or the para stream. Some of the internal support we provide is a little bit different. But when it comes to marketing and promotion, working with our partners, we really listen to the corporate world. We sit down and listen to our partners and figure out which is the best approach to take. We do, quite honestly, encourage our partners to work with all 3 teams. So we have other partners who have engaged ambassadors, for example, from our men's team, our women's team, and our para team to support whatever program that they develop, or other grassroots programs. But if we do have partners who have a particular target audience, for example, if you look at Jane's and their desire to reach that female audience, the mom, the shopper, aligning with the national women's team and what our female players represent is really good alignment. It's a stronger alignment for them than directly with our national junior team. And so being able to combine the 2 by focusing on the women and using the junior team in a secondary role is very unique, but very effective for Jane's because of the alignment with their target audience. So we were fortunate that we've got a wide range of athletes, a wide range of programs to work with, and we can be really responsive to what our partners' objectives are to create programs that are going to deliver for both for them and for us.
Just to jump in on there, you know, it does provide us the best of both worlds. Our primary household, our primary consumer is the primary household shopper, which in 2021 remains true to be a woman. However, doesn't mean she's the one doing the shopping, but she's certainly one that's writing the list. So, and then our especially with our pub style brand, our end user is children, and there's young girls who, you know, if you want to play the long game, they're going to be our future Jane's consumers and future moms, as well as we've got all our great girl dads out there that want to build and support their daughters. And, you know, as a woman who grew up playing hockey, and I played against Jana Hefford myself when I was in high school, you know, it's really about embracing those life skills that will stick with you for life. So I know in my career, you know, especially having played goalie at one point, you know, adversity, perseverance, teamwork, confidence, strength are all things that come out of playing hockey and any sport for that matter. And it's really that inspiration to, you know, the next generation is it goes beyond just, you know, making it past playing, you know, Pee-wee or Bantam. Sorry, I should say U13. But into, you know, going after your first job and, you know, other factors in your life. So, you know, there's a big picture at play in terms of, you know, those values and life skills that come out of sport, let alone friendship and all that other stuff that you know, that resonates with girls especially.
And was that a conscious decision you were making coming into the partnership, that you were looking for something in this space because you're already involved with CHL? You know, was it a continuation in hockey? Was it this was where your consumer was going to be, or was it more of here's a huge white space opportunity for you?
It was a little bit of both, right? So we know that Canadians are irrationally obsessed with hockey. And, you know, you don't want to spread yourself too thin and try to do everything, right? So we were already involved in hockey, so we wanted to make it a targeted effort. And like I said, the gift of time with COVID, we were already down the path of doing something with the national women's team, but we knew that we could make it bigger and better. And I just a shout out to our friends at MediaCom. They're a strategic agency, so a lot of collective brain power going into saying, you know, what is that nugget, and, you know, what is that opportunity that we can show up differently in the market than what consumers are used to seeing when it comes to women's sport.
And you know, the stat that just blows my mind is that, you know, $57 billion was spent in sports sponsorship in 2020, but only $1 billion of that went to women's sport. And, you know, our brand's missing the mark when it comes to investing in women's sport.
I think that there are some brands out there that are very forward thinking and recognize the power of women's sport long before today, and we're the kind of the early adopters, the early supporters. We're seeing more and more interest in women's sport. I think in the past, women's sport, you know, in the absence of professional leagues, you have individual sports. So you've had tennis and golf, and then you have there's always peak interest during Olympic windows, where you do get to see a whole range of women athletes. But there also are gaps between those Olympic windows. So, you know, I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. I think there are just, again, in the absence of as many professional leagues as there are for men, there aren't the same number of opportunities to support the women as there are for men. But for those brands that you know, really want to be seen as involved as they want, if they want to be seen as you know, I'm going to say contemporary, as forward thinking, then women's sport offers a tremendous opportunity. And you've seen the, you know, the growth of women's sport with not just with hockey, but with with soccer, for example, with our national women's soccer team, which quite frankly has a higher profile than our men's team until just very recently. That was a real turn of the tables, but really exciting to see. And you're seeing other leagues being very progressive in their support of the women's game. So, Premier League soccer has the Premier Women's League, and Mexico, all the professional teams in Mexico also have associated women's teams. And I think that using the as James is doing, quite honestly, using that spotlight that is on and that high interest that is on the men's teams and leagues and athletes to, using that as extending that spotlight to embrace women's sports is very important, and is a way that women's sport is going to grow, not exclusively, but I just think that it's a little bit short-sighted to think that you could just grow it organically. I think with so many media opportunities, such a competitive sports environment out there, that combining women's sports aligned with men's sports, as we do in Hockey Canada, for example, is presenting a very balanced way to be able to show your support and really help the women's sports, and not just hockey, but all sports grow.
And on that, like, All In is really about our conviction, right, to celebrate the women's game, right? When you play poker, you don't go kind of in, you go all in. And then there's that nuance of growing the game together. And that's really about, hockey's a team sport, and so is evolving the game, right? So it's going to be a combination of efforts from sponsors, fans, players, athletes, men, women, governing bodies. So that's really what that is grounded in. And I think to Dana's point, it's like, if a brand wants to use traditional sponsorship methods like a rink board or logo recognition, then the rink board is only as good as the people that are seeing it, right? But it's about finding other ways to leverage and benefit from the movement and the purpose, right, to develop the sport, so that one day that rink board is going to be something that is going to be what's a word I'm reaching for, like sought after, right? Just like it is with the men's sports. You're going to want that TV visible rink board because it's going to have that value. But again, we got to go beyond the traditional tools in order to get there.
Well, I think that kind of leads into the conversation we were having just before we got onto the session, what the impact of COVID has been, and, not having an audience in the arena or in the stadium, how has that changed how sponsors been? And I think a lot of brands and a lot of properties have had to say, okay, where can I take all of my assets to where my fans are? Because my fans haven't stopped being fans. They just can't be in the space. And it almost seems like the world has helped all these other legs you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that, for like the athletes have become even more of a focus during COVID than they were before, because they're the connection point to the game. So when they're not playing, there's still tremendous interest in the athletes. And there's been great opportunity for the athletes to grow their individual brands during COVID. And then for that to be a multiplier effect when you're reassembling teams, when you're now back on the ice or back on the pitch, there's kind of a multiplier effect that's happened there. And I don't think coming into COVID, we were very much focused on live events. I think anybody in the property business, it was about live events. And yes, you had social and digital, but it was very secondary or supplementary. And then all of a sudden, we kept talking about the growth of digital and the growth of social, but it was slow in most cases because live events are so dominant. And then all of a sudden there were no live events. So everybody had to flip the switch instantaneously. We had to find ways. And what we ended up doing was we started working more closely with our players, our athletes who were also isolated, They were at home, they were training in their backyards, they were improvising. And so we developed a different level of relationship and started to create a lot more content using our athletes, because we didn't have the games that were generating the content. The athletes were separated, they weren't together. We found ways to bring them together virtually. And so, there were some, I hate the word pivot. This is not my favorite word, but there were a lot of pivots, a lot of adjustments, a lot of alterations made. And now I think as we move forward and start to get back into live events, I don't think the other side is going to go away. I think it presented a great opportunity. Everybody had to work quickly and adapt and adopt to new ways of doing things. And now we need to combine the two. So now you've got new ways to engage. And athletes have created a whole new channel themselves, right? They now talk much more directly to the audience. They are they are businesses unto themselves, brands unto themselves, and it will be up to properties to work collaboratively with the athletes to create bigger opportunities working together. So I think that's all ahead of us, and all as a part of the impact, one of the impacts anyhow, that we felt from COVID, from the last 20 months.
There's a question in the chat just relative to the stat I threw out about how much globally was invested in sport and women's sport. I don't have the information for Canada, but my take on it, just looking at it from an outsider, is there's a WNBA, there's an NWSL, there's a women's Premier League. There are all these professional sports that are, women's-led sports elsewhere in the world, not in Canada. And I wonder whether that creates a great opportunity for, one, the development of women's sport, but also for brands to become champions of that.
It certainly does. It certainly does create opportunities, with more and more women's sports at more and more levels. I do think there are brands that need that. There's great opportunity for brands to step up and show leadership. The essence of sponsorship is that emotional connection. It's that emotional connection that fans have for the sport, for the athletes. And it's brands tapping into that shared passion point that helps a brand differentiate, that helps a brand build loyalty, that helps a brand build relationship with its consumers. And I think that women's sport is a tremendous opportunity to do that. For those brands that are stepping up now, you see it with some of the PWHPA sponsors. We've had many brands, that are our partners, and you look at Jane's, and what Jane's and what Joanne and her team have done to really elevate the profile, feature, and celebrate the women athletes is really. I think I'll let Joanne speak to the impact it's had on the brand and on results, but it creates win-win opportunities. So I think women's sports is a tremendous space. There's loads of white space. There's loads of opportunities where in men's sports it's there's can be a lot of clutter, and it takes a lot of creativity to differentiate. In women's sports, I think there's just tremendous opportunity there, and equally tremendous personalities to be part of the story.
And so Sarah writes in the chat just about asking what other obstacles do you find outside of COVID for getting attention to women's sports, and is this, somebody else wrote earlier, is this a CRTC scenario where you start mandating that there should be a balance created or a minimum created, or is it a chicken and an egg? Do they need to build the product before they get the audience, or they need the audience before the product's there?
The reality too is that sponsorship and professional sports, or in general, it's a commercial exchange, right? It's the media is selling impressions, and it's about being at the right place at the right time. And I think that if you look at Olympic coverage and some of the memories of highlights from past Olympics, it's not like the TV's turned off when the women's sports were playing, right? So it's a matter of it's a putting them in the right time slots, giving the opportunities, getting the coverage, right? So our team at Mediacom shared with us, it was a French journalist that took a week of sports pages from a publication and cut out the images of the men's sports to show just the amount of women's sports that were being reported on, right? And there was a lot of holes. So, you know, I think it's a bigger thing. Dana can probably chime in a bit on this one too, but it has to be looking at it beyond impressions, or putting them in a place to get impressions. And kudos to TSN this year that all games from the Women's Worlds were broadcasted. Again, giving all those players the profile that they deserve, and getting them the recognition to become household names. And that's a start, right? Versus just broadcasting the games where you're going to get the impressions.
It's definitely a collaborative effort. You need a good sports product. You need to have a good media partner, and you'd say kudos to TSN as well for the Women's Worlds, and not just for the Women's Worlds. I mean, TSN was fundamental in building the following and making the World Juniors appointment viewing. They did the same thing for the CFL, right? So a media partner is very important. And I think if you're building support for the sport, it isn't just about the numbers. It isn't just about the eyeballs. It's about the brand of the sport. It's about what you do with it and how you use it to build your own brand. And that's really what you need to focus on. So, and I think women's sports represents a great opportunity to do that. So it's not just, it's not just a numbers game. The sport won't get to be big enough to sustain itself by the numbers without investment, without creativity, without belief that it can get there. And Damien Cox wrote a really interesting article when the CWHL folded. And there were a lot of naysayers out there, and well, this is the end of professional women's hockey. And Damien Cox said, just wait a minute, that no league is born and sustained, that every league goes through a cycle, goes through growth, goes through contraction. The NHL is like that. The NHL didn't just appear as a multi-billion-dollar league. It grew over many, many, many years and decades. And other hockey leagues have come and gone. And it's happened in other sports. So in no way was the CWHL folding the end of professional women's hockey. It was a step along the way of the evolution of professional women's hockey. And that it will rise again, and there will be different conditions, maybe a different business model, and it will grow again, and it might go through another cycle after that. We don't know, but it is not. No league just instantaneously comes into being. Look at Major League Soccer and the growing pains that it went through over a long period of time before it reached its current level of popularity in North America. So, I think it's a long process, and that it's not the end of the world that there isn't a professional women's hockey league now. But we certainly, look forward to the day when there is a league, and then we can watch our women play on a much more regular basis.
It goes back to, I think I don't know if I said this in the pre-chat or in this chat, but it's a team sport, right? So getting all those collective people in a room and pointing their energy in the same direction versus all paddling in different directions is going to get us a lot further, a lot quicker. And like Dana said, like there's history and there's precedent. And I think the NBA has done it really well, right? You're tapping into existing brand loyalty in terms of, developing teams that mirror the men's team, and then channel support. So the future looks bright if we can just get people paddling in the same direction.
Oh yeah, there's certainly a lot of people interested, and they're trying to figure out how to make it commercially viable. And there was a question we got in the advanced questions about authenticity, and it's a big element of sponsorship and how people are viewing sponsorship engagement. Is the manner in which a brand's going to step into women's sport, does it have to be authentically different than it would be in any other engagement? Or is it still the same business decision from your end?
I don't think it needs to be different. I just think that your message can be more targeted, I guess, and like in our case, we're really about inspiring the next generation and talking directly to our consumer, right? But that doesn't mean that our female consumer doesn't like watch World Juniors or cheer on the NHL teams and support men's sports, right? So it's a matter of, you don't want to alienate any audience at the same time, but you want to celebrate and elevate a certain line of messaging, right? So it's like we talked about before, it's a win-win because you can be fans of both. We just want to repurpose the eyeballs and the awareness to make headways in women's sports to support the growth of the women's game.
And then, you've had at least a cycle and a bit of the all-in program. Were there certain milestones that you were looking for, and have you hit them, and sort of where are you striving to improve on?
Yeah, at the end of the day, like Dana mentioned, for us, it's about creating an emotional connection through shared interests to give our customers and consumers a reason to believe beyond price. So for me, at the end of the day, I need to sell chicken, but I also need to lead with purpose and get that inspirational component. And for us, we've gotten tremendous support from our retail partners. We've been able to, and our products are on shelves at every store across Canada. So that's some major real estate in terms of sharing the message and sharing our mantra. And last year we had 17 promotional packages out there featuring those athletes, giving them profile, as well as getting support from our customers. And we've been able to deliver tremendous sales results and customer and consumer engagement. And we're on track to deliver another really great program this year. It's like we talked about previously. It's like things that you don't expect sometimes force you to make shifts, but sometimes those shifts deliver better work, right? And we were talking about there was no live events. Typically, when we did the Design a Mask program, the kid would win the Design a Mask, and then their family would go get to see their mask live at an event. And then you may have seen during Women's Worlds, we had to reshift everything. And then we said, okay, well, let's bring the experience to them. We had a Zoom call. We were able to introduce, Sarah Nurse and Carolyn Willett and Devin Levi to these young girls that won the contest. And then in a few short weeks, Carolyn Willett's going to be going to their hometown and putting on a skills clinic for them and their team. So it's really about taking that from an individual experience and sharing it to that team experience and inspiring more young girls, right? And something that they would never get access to otherwise. So sometimes things happen and that you don't expect, and you pivot, and great things come out of it.
I think my comment on just sort of being an outsider, watching what's been going on, and being a shopper and going in with my kids, that you seem to have had an all-in relationship when it comes with your brand managers and the engagement at the retail level, whether it was on purpose or not, or done consciously. It seems to be that all that packaging with the players on it is at eye level for my kids. To the point that they're making that selection every time. So anyways, if that wasn't on purpose, it's a fantastic coincidence, and it's helping move product for sure.
That's the power of the brand association. I think it's that's where the a partnership comes to life in the retail environment. And we're delighted to see our brand on shelf alongside Jane's. Partners like Jane's are really, really important for our brand and for property brands, because it helps take our brand into channels that we wouldn't normally have access to. So, their interest in doing it means that our brand brings something to the relationship. And for Hockey Canada, it enables us to have our brand. We have lots of sports environments where we can have our brand in front of consumers, but through partners like Jane's, it enables us to bring our brand into a retail environment where otherwise we wouldn't be able to be. So we're able to interact with our consumers or our target audience in an environment outside of a hockey rink. And so that's part of the win-win, I think, of the partnership for us and for Jane's, is that there's a benefit to both of us to being together on the Jane's package at point of sale. So partnerships like this, I think, really work the best when there are shared positive outcomes. And in this case, we're really happy with what's happened so far and where it's going.
And our customers believe in what we're doing, right? That if I was just to make a 10 card with a really appetizing plate of chicken, they'd be like, great, thanks. It's propaganda. But at this, it adds value to their shoppers' experience. It adds value that, we are leading with purpose, and it resonates with their consumer too, which is the primary household shopper.
So do you see certain industries, like industry verticals, that are investing in, are more apt to invest in women's sport? Because I think, Kruger's got the long-standing attachment with Scotties and curling, and Secret investing with the PWPHA. Is it that endemic alignment with women in general, or do you think there's more opportunity and you see people stepping up into that space?
Well, there's lots of brands that have been involved with women's sports for a long time. Scotiabank is one of those leaders. They were the first sponsor of the CWHL many years ago. They've had their Girls Hockey Fest program for many years. Molson has been a great supporter of the women's game over the years. Esso, who's been in hockey for 80 years, has their Esso Fun Days program with us, which is to create a first-time, sort of safe, comfortable hockey experience for girls and women. So there are lots of examples of brands that have been investing in the women's game, or women's sports up until now. But I think there's a whole new level of interest. I think, quite honestly, at least speaking about hockey, the success of the national women's team at the Olympics, every quad there's been a gold medal every 4 in a row. So that's had a tremendous impact. And then with all of the general, I'm going to say the broader societal change, all of the effort behind ED&I by so many organizations who have really embraced the concept of inclusion, embraced the concept of diversity, and are making a very concerted effort in that space, has broadened the number of brands that are being proactive in supporting women's sports. So I think the broader, societal shifts are going to be beneficial to women's sport. And again, there's synergies there, there's alignment, and it's a very sort of symbiotic process and symbiotic relationship where you see the advancement and promotion of women in society in general at levels of business. We're seeing the same thing happen with support for different levels of performance for women in sports. So, it's been, there's still a ways to go, but, compared to where we were 10 years ago or further back than that, there's certainly very good progress, and there's certainly a number of brands that are leading the way there.
And do you see an Olympic effect, that there seems to be, like, every 2 years, whether it's summer or winter, that there's a different uptick in engagement?
Yeah, there definitely is. I think the Olympics have been historically the platform for women's sports before there were any professional women's leagues. Other than tennis and golf, which immediately come to mind. Really, the Olympics was the platform for women's sports. And when the Olympics shifted from both, it's how old I am, when we used to have both the Winter and Summer Olympics in the same year, when they started to split that created a platform, a more regular platform every 2 years for women's sports. And then we've seen the growth of professional leagues. So there's a more regular access and opportunity watch high performance women's sports. It used to be, I think, much more limited. But the Olympics are always a catalyst. They're a catalyst for women's sports. They're a catalyst for those sports that are not mass participation sports. For those athletes, it puts them in the spotlight. So the Olympics are a very unique and special time. We're fortunate in hockey that we have other platforms. We have annual world championships at multiple different age levels. So, we're fortunate from in that perspective as a sport that, and of course there's the professional ranks, but that's again has been predominantly male. So Olympics are very important, I think, in the growth and development of women's sport in general. And they're certainly part of the story of the growth of women's hockey.
And it's really about visibility, right? So, the Olympics provides that visibility. And, one of the insights when we were building the All In program was that I think it was Becky Scott, who is an Olympic skier. She saw a cover, a female athlete on the cover of Sports Illustrated in her sport. And she that landed with her. And she's like, well, if they can do it, I can do it too, right? So the more profile we can give these women to encourage the future generation, it's going to have a groundswell in terms of participation. There's statistics about how girls fall out of playing the sport at an earlier age than boys because there's nowhere they can go in certain realms, right? So, it's a domino effect, and I think visibility and celebrating those athletes in the Olympics certainly do help in giving profile to both sport and to the athletes.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a huge factor of seeing somebody like you being able to do it, and all the rumors around the development of a WNBA team in Canada or an NWSL team in Canada could be pretty exciting if it actually gets to fruition. Do you find that coming into an Olympic year, does that impact your engagement in the current program you're in? Like, do you have a stop the alignment with and the activity you're doing?
The good news is we're a proud partner of Hockey Canada, 365 days a year, whether there's an Olympics or not. So you'll see our packaging sporting the Hockey Canada logo proudly from November through till the end of February. And because we've been running this program in conjunction with the Women's Worlds, we've got lots of precedent in terms of our actions are not new. They're just a continuation of what we've been doing. So it's just a cherry on top that Team Canada will be taking the ice in that time period.
And the changes are, to Brad's point, there used to be an Olympic blackout window where no one other than Olympic sponsors could feature athletes who were competing in the games in their marketing and communications. That Rule 40 has since been adapted because it was recognized that it was unfairly penalizing athletes who had personal endorsements with brands who were not Olympic partners, and that those brands who had been with them and those 4-year windows between Olympics all of a sudden were precluded or prohibited from using and associating themselves with that athlete at peak time during the actual Olympic Games. So that those changes to Rule 40, of which there are certain conditions, has created the opportunity for brands to engage with athletes who are competing in the games right up to and through the Olympic window. So that has certainly increased the level of activity that we've seen. We have several of our partners who are not Olympic partners, but who will be in market up to and through the Olympics, featuring members of our national women's team. And so that has, to your point, Brett, has had a big effect. That change in that rule, which now enables more brands to be, to show their active support for our athletes during that peak window of the Olympics.
Perfect. And then we've got Rulani actually wants to jump in with a question. Rulani, want to turn your mic on and ask?
Hi, yes, I just wanted to ask particularly about the women's, because I noticed that there's going to be women's soccer league that they're bringing, I guess, to Ontario in Canada. And I wanted to know about sponsorship, and also if there's going to be, you know how they have these high performance athlete schools in Ontario where they have students who are upcoming either playing in provincial or even national leagues that are in these schools. Do you guys have a plan maybe to even highlight some of these young athletes? And there's a lot of talent pool there that sometimes doesn't get noticed because of they're not on some of these platforms. But it would be a good way to start with these up and coming young athletes and maybe have I don't know, maybe some sort of liaison, or have some of the athletes in these leagues like the women and hockey teams or Women's Canada soccer team come in and do like maybe mentorship with these people through that program. That's my question, or comment rather.
Well, I can't speak to soccer directly, but I can tell you what happens on the hockey front. And we have a couple of programs that do exactly what you're referring to. So one is a new program called Pond to Podium, where we host events and we create opportunities for young athletes to engage with our national team athletes. Actually, I was just in Ottawa about 10 days ago. Our national women's team was playing the US in we call the Rivalry Series. And just before the game, we hosted an event with 100 young players and their parents and local coaches. And they had an opportunity to hear from a panel of our national team athletes who were able to just talk about their experience of being on the national team, and also the audience. Lots of the girls came prepared. When somebody said other questions, normally you look around the room and kind of waiting to see who was going to put their hand up. All of a sudden, like 20 hands just went up in a shot, because the young players had questions they wanted to ask our women players. So we try to do that through it's called Pond to Podium. It is presented by Canadian Tire, another one of our partners. And so coaches and players have access to the experience of our national team, not just the players, but coaches and support staff to help advance as well. And then, of course, we have programs. We have a program, it's called Program of Excellence, where we work with our member branches, who are the provincial organizations responsible for managing grassroots hockey in their region. And they identify players who they feel have potential to advance to a higher level, whether that's to a national team or just up a notch, or up ultimately to the junior team. So we start them in what's called the POE, the Program of Excellence at age 6, at under 16s. The first time they come to Hockey Canada is under 17. That's when we actually start to offer camps and programs. And then you go from the under 17s to under 18s, where there's international competitions. The next step is under 20s, which is juniors. And then they go on from there. So we do our best. I think there's, we're always looking for new ways that we can take the experience and expertise we have at the high performance level and share that at the grassroots level. For those who are interested. I mean, ultimately, hockey we just want people to be on the ice having fun. So, and being able to have access. Anybody who wants to play the game should have access to the game. So that's our underlying premise, which is so important to us. And then for those who do aspire to play at higher levels, we want to provide a pathway for them to do that. So again, we're fortunate that we have involvement in the sport from grassroots to high performance, and we do our best to create a really virtuous circle where our high performance players and staff give back to that grassroots community, and then we inspire the next generation of players.
I think I volunteer and I coach youth rugby, and I find the engagement with the PSO, the Provincial Sporting Organization, and the National Sporting Organization, and having those older athletes come and work with the younger kids, that they start identifying. And I find that, especially with the girls, when they see an 18-year-old woman who's playing rugby, it's like, okay, well, you know what? This is something I can stick with. And there's really kind of that attachment that develops. So it's finding those moments where they don't see themselves being excluded as they move up.
And it really is, if you see it, you can be it. I mean, it's not a new craze, but it still resonates today, and particularly in sports that are not, quote unquote, traditional sports that girls play. So, there have been female figure skaters forever. There haven't been female hockey players forever, or female rugby players for that matter, or soccer players. So having those high performance athletes being on a national stage, providing that visibility really is tremendous opportunity to inspire, and for anybody that really wants to move up that ladder of experience to, you know, it's incumbent on national sport organizations like Hockey Canada and rugby and others to create that opportunity, to create that pathway and create that great first experience. If you just want to play house league and be out there with your buddies and having fun on the ice, or if you have a bit more of a competitive spirit and want to take on, you know, a more rigorous training and really push yourself to see how far you can actually go, it's up to us to provide those, you know, working with our provincial partners to provide those opportunities, because it is a collaborative effort. It isn't just Hockey Canada that does that. We work very closely with our member branches. They are essential to the success of hockey in this country, from both grassroots to high performance.
Yeah. And as we're just kind of getting to the end of the hour, I'd love to give you the opportunity to kind of have some last notes. Like, do you have suggestions for how brands can maximize the opportunity in women's sports and motivate them to become more engaged and actually help grow the sports?
I just think it's making space for it, right? So putting it into your plans, carving out budget for it, carving out a messaging for it, right? Just not doing the same old things just because that's what's always been done, right? And I think that you can find inroads like we've done, where we can have the best of both worlds, right? We're a proud sponsor of the World Junior Team, and those young men are tremendous athletes, and we never want to take away from anything that they're doing, but we want to create that one team, one leaf kind of approach and celebrate the game together. And I think there's a lot that can be done if you just kind of flip the script and look at things differently than the way you might have done it 5 years ago, right? There's lots of white spaces, you already mentioned, right? It's just about having the opportunity, the carving it out and using it to your advantage.
And I just add, for those brands that are, it's first of all, it's important to understand your target audience, and to and then understanding the values of the brand. What does it stand for? What do the athletes stand for? What does the sport stand for? And then seeing the opportunity there. Hockey is a very crowded space. It's the #1 sport in the country. It's, we all know the big brands that play in the men's game, but it can be cluttered, and it's more and more challenging year after year to carve out white space. And that's what the women's game, women's sports in general offers to brands, a way to differentiate, a way to carve out some space of their own, to do something unique, to be a pioneer, and to be a leader, to have creative opportunities. So I think there's lots of opportunity there. My hat's off to the brands who've already stepped up to be supporting the women's games, like James and some of our other partners.
I think there's huge opportunity, and I think we've kind of recommended a number of people we've been working with that it creates such uncluttered space, as you were saying. Like, if you want to stand out, there's a greater opportunity to stand out in women's sport than in a cluttered space, like going to MLSE or going to one of the big teams where you get a rink board for one period for the same investment you might get going into women's sport. So it's really creating that balance of how you want to be seen and where your customer is going to be. But really thank both of you for giving your time today. Fantastic to have you, Joanne and Dana. Great conversation, and I know there's a number of questions we didn't get to, but if anybody wants to send them in, I can share them back and provide some commentary back to you on it. We have recorded the session. It'll be up on our website along with all of our other past sessions, and you can dive into that material there. And thank you again for participating, and we will share the information on our sessions coming up in January on purpose and brands, as well as association sponsorships, and look forward to having you then. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks very much, Brad.